One post, one edit, and suddenly, you're the criminal. Imagine waking up to police at your door. They have evidence, screenshots, IP addresses, timestamps, all pointing to you. But here's the thing, you didn't do it. Someone else did. Someone who knows how to manipulate the one thing we all trust, digital evidence. This is the story of a hacker who didn't steal money. He stole something far more valuable in people's lives, and he did it without ever meeting them. In 2019, a series of disturbing events began unfolding across 3 different cities. First, a teacher in California received death threats from an anonymous account, but when police traced the IP address, it led to a college student named David Chen, someone who had never even heard of the teacher. Then, a journalist in New York was accused of hacking into a company's database. The digital footprints were clear: her device, her login credentials, her timestamps, except she was on vacation in another country when it happened. And finally, a software engineer in Texas found his identity linked to a dark web marketplace selling stolen credit cards. His bank accounts were frozen, his reputation destroyed, and worst of all, he had no way to prove his innocence. 3 victims, 3 different crimes, but one invisible connection no one saw coming. Let's go back to the beginning. David Chen, the college student, was the first victim. On March 12, 2019, police knocked on his door with a warrant. They showed him screenshots of threatening messages sent from his email account to a teacher he'd never met. The messages were graphic, disturbing, and very real. But David had an alibi. He was in class when the messages were sent. His professor confirmed it. His classmates confirmed it. Yet the digital evidence said otherwise. The IP address matched his apartment. The email account had his password. Even the metadata on the images attached to the threats pointed back to his device. The case went cold for weeks, until the journalist, Rebecca Torres, became the second victim. She was accused of corporate espionage, hacking into a pharmaceutical company's internal network. The evidence? Login records showing her credentials, accessing restricted files at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. But Rebecca was in London that week, attending a conference. She had plane tickets, hotel receipts, even photos time-stamped with GPS data proving she wasn't in the country. Still, the company pressed charges, and still, no one could explain how someone else used her credentials without triggering any security alerts. Then came Michael Lawson, the software engineer. His identity was found all over a dark web forum used to trade stolen financial information. His real name, his real address, even photos of his driver's license. When authorities raided his home, they found nothing. No illegal software, no encrypted files, nothing. But the damage was done. He lost his job, his family didn't know what to believe, and every time he tried to explain what happened, people looked at him like he was lying. Because in the digital world, evidence doesn't lie, right? The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, a cybersecurity researcher named Dr. Lynn Park, who had been quietly tracking a pattern of digital manipulation cases across forums and security reports. She noticed something strange. In all 3 cases, the digital evidence was too perfect, too clean, almost like it had been engineered to look authentic. Dr. Park discovered that the hacker was using a technique called digital ghosting. Here's how it worked. First, the hacker would identify a target, usually someone with a stable online presence, predictable routines, and weak password security. Then, he would clone their digital identity, not by hacking their accounts directly, but by creating perfect replicas. Fake email accounts with one letter changed, spoofed IP addresses that appeared legitimate, even manipulated metadata on files to match the victim's device signature. But the real genius? He was using public Wi-Fi networks near the victims' homes or workplaces to send the evidence. So when investigators traced the IP addresses, they led straight back to locations the victims actually frequented. It looked like they were there. It looked like they did it. The police had been chasing shadows, because in every case, the person they arrested wasn't the criminal, they were the frame. Dr. Park brought her findings to the FBI. At first, they were skeptical. Digital evidence is considered reliable. Courts trust it. Juries believe it. But as they dug deeper, they found something even more disturbing. The hacker had left a signature. A tiny piece of code embedded in the fake evidence files a timestamp that was off by exactly 3.7 seconds. It was so subtle that no one had noticed it before. But once they knew what to look for, it was everywhere. And then, the investigators found the connection. All three victims had one thing in common. They had recently posted something online that contradicted or criticized a specific tech company. David had written a blog post about data privacy violations. Rebecca had published an article exposing unethical practices in the pharmaceutical industry. Michael had contributed to an open-source project that exposed security flaws in corporate software. Someone was silencing them, not with violence, but with something far more insidious. They were turning the system against them. The FBI tracked the code signature to a dark web marketplace where digital framing services were being sold. For a price, anyone could hire this hacker to destroy someone's reputation, get them arrested, or simply ruin their life. The service was called the Puppeteer. The Puppeteer had been operating for over 3 years, with at least 47 confirmed victims. But here's where it gets even darker. The hacker wasn't working alone. He was part of a network, a group of individuals hired by corporations, vengeful exes, business rivals, anyone willing to pay. And the cost? Between $10,000 and $50,000 per target. In June 2020, after months of surveillance, the FBI finally identified the mastermind. His name was Eric Volkov, a former cybersecurity consultant who had once worked for the very agencies now hunting him. He knew how investigators thought. He knew what evidence they trusted, and he knew exactly how to exploit it. But when they raided his apartment in Seattle, they found something unexpected. Volkov wasn't just framing people for profit, he was conducting an experiment. He wanted to prove that in the digital age, truth doesn't matter anymore. Only evidence does. And evidence can be created, manipulated, and weaponized. In his final message before his arrest, Volkov posted a manifesto online. You trust what you see on a screen more than what you know in your heart. I didn't destroy these people's lives. You did, because you believed a timestamp over a human being. Eric Volkov was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. David, Rebecca, and Michael had their names cleared, but the scars remain. David still gets looks from people who remember the headlines. Rebecca struggles to find work in journalism because some still question her integrity. And Michael? He changed his name and left the country. The case exposed a terrifying truth. In a world where everything is digital, your entire life can be rewritten by someone you've never met. Your emails, your photos, your location history. All of it can be forged. And once it's out there, once the accusation is made, the damage is done. So here's the question that keeps investigators up at night. If evidence is digital, how do we know what's real? And more importantly, how many others are still out there, framing the innocent while we trust the screens in front of us?